The monthly dinners with the Briarley family were never really about sharing a meal. They were more like an exhibition, each relative showing off who could flex their wealth the hardest. Tonight, at the family's sprawling estate on the southwestern Gold Coast of Connecticut, I had a feeling it was going to be especially painful. I settled into my usual seat near the fireplace, doing what I always did, watching quietly while my cousins tried to outboast each other. "Just picked up a ranch in Napa Valley," Grant said, stretching out the words like they deserved applause. He gave his wine a slow swirl. "Place is right next to some tycoon's villa. Guy owns a massive winery out there." Vivian let out a dramatic sigh and flipped open her designer clutch like she was striking a pose. "Well, we just closed on olive groves in Apulia. Private access to the Adriatic. You can't even put a price on a view like that." I sipped my iced tea and kept the smirk to myself. If only they had the slightest clue. "Nora," Aunt Marjorie's sharp tone broke through the noise, cutting across the table like a blade. "You are being unusually quiet." Grant leaned forward with a fake sincere expression, thick with mock concern. "We were just chatting about your housing situation." There it was, the part one had been waiting for. "What about it?" I asked, setting down my glass calmly. "That cramped little duplex in Bridgeport," he said, voice dripping with superiority. "Still renting, right? That place on Harper Street?" Vivian leaned in with a look of exaggerated surprise. "People our age still rent? That is wild." I almost laughed out loud. "That Harper Street building?" It was actually Foundation Hill Group's first commercial acquisition. They thought I was just another renter scraping by, when in truth, I owned the entire thing. "I actually like the place," I answered coolly. "You are 34, sweetheart," Aunt Marjorie said with that sugary, condescending smile of hers. "It is time to grow up and invest in something real." Something real? Try $1.5 billion in real estate assets, everything from apartment buildings to commercial high-rises. And yes, even Briarley Plaza, the very property they were sitting in that night. I had acquired a controlling stake in it 8 months earlier, using a private equity route that not one of them could trace back to me. "I am doing just fine," I replied. Grant leaned back with a smug grin. "Sounds like you cannot even qualify for a home loan." I did not bother arguing. I just sat there and let them talk, knowing it would not be long before a lease renewal landed on their desks, with my name printed clearly on the top of the letterhead. My father finally looked up from his wine. "Now, Grant," he said, "not everyone gets your razor-sharp instincts. Deborah has made her own decisions." Aunt Marjorie sighed dramatically, like I had failed the family simply by choosing not to marry some hedge fund executive or become a social media influencer. In their minds, I was probably still struggling to sell rundown apartments to broke graduate students, scraping by on tiny commission checks. What they did not know was that I, Deborah Winslow, the family's so-called underachiever, was the founder of Foundation Hill Group. The same company that had been quietly acquiring residential and commercial properties throughout the Pacific Northwest for the past 10 years. "Speaking of real estate," Vivian piped up, a gleam in her eye, "did you hear what is going on over on Harper Street? Some development firm bought the entire block." She gave me a look of faux sympathy. "Sounds like they are going to demolish everything. Guess that little apartment of yours will finally be gone." I kept my expression neutral. She had no idea I was the buyer. And no, demolition was never part of the plan. That building had character, brickwork, original finishes, and rent protections for families who had lived there for generations. I was deep into a thoughtful renovation, preserving every detail. "Is that so?" I asked casually. I had not heard. "Well, of course not," Grant scoffed. "That kind of deal is way out of your league. If you get pushed out," Aunt Marjorie said in a cheerful tone that barely masked the insult, "you can always come stay in the guest house. We will even help you find something more appropriate. Maybe even someone appropriate." "I am doing just fine," I replied flatly. "And so is my landlord." Vivian chuckled under her breath. "You cannot live a tiny life forever, darling. The Winslow name used to mean something around here. It still meant something, just not in the way they understood. In the real estate world, Foundation Hill Group was known for responsible development and tenant-first investments. My approach was the complete opposite of my cousins, who were too busy bulldozing communities to make space for luxury condos and social media bragging rights. My father cleared his throat and set down his glass. Actually, this dinner is partly about business. The board has concerns about the new majority owner of Briarlay Plaza. I tilted my head slightly. Foundation Hill Group bought in 8 months ago, he said. But no one seems to know who is behind it. Probably some offshore billionaire, Grant said, nodding like he knew something. Old money types are obsessed with trophy properties. If only they knew the investor they were all so worried about was sitting right there at their table, wearing a thrift store blazer and scuffed-up boots. And now, my father added, they want answers. Especially about how we handle our finances. Answers would be tough to give, considering Grant had dipped into the property fund to bankroll his Napa Valley getaway, and Vivian had expensed her luxury handbags as client gifts. I am sure it is nothing serious, Aunt Marjorie muttered, fidgeting with the clasp on her pearls. The Winslow name still carries weight. That seems to be part of the problem, my father replied. This Foundation Hill entity does not care about reputation. They have initiated a full audit. You could see it hit them. No shouting, just that tight, frozen look people get when they realize they might actually be exposed. That audit would not just show a few indulgent line items, it would unravel their entire game. Maybe Deborah can help, Vivian said sweetly, turning to me like we had always been close. She works in property, right? She might know someone involved. Suddenly, all eyes were on me. The black sheep was now a possible asset. I mostly handle modest residential properties, I said with a smooth shrug. Nothing on the scale of this building. Oh, come on, Grant snapped. You cannot even do one thing for your own family? My mother gave him a look, but stayed quiet. My father did not even glance up from his phone. None of them realized how much I was about to help, just not in the way they expected. By morning, Foundation Hill Group would publish a press release announcing sweeping changes to Briarlay Plaza's management. No more personal charges disguised as business. No more hiring cousins at triple rates. No more slush funds dressed up as consulting. I looked around the room, expensive art paid for with repair funds, furniture billed way over retail, fixtures installed by Vivian's husband's company with padded invoices. Well, I said, brushing off my jeans, some of us actually have work in the morning. Vivian gave a smug little grin. Off to show another shoebox with peeling paint? I threw my worn bag over my shoulder. Inside it were documents worth millions, board briefings, legal plans, renovation proposals. They had no idea. Nora, Aunt Marjorie called after me, voice sugary, try dressing more like a Winslow next time. Image matters. I smiled as I walked away. Do not worry. Tomorrow, I will look exactly how the Winslows expect. They just did not realize I was already the one making the decisions. The next morning, I stood in my real office, a penthouse floor that looked out over downtown Bridgeport. The moment I had planned for was finally here. My assistant, Tess, came in and placed a coffee beside my laptop. The board is already seated, she said. Your family arrived early. It seems trying to work the independents. I pictured Grant and Vivian laying it on thick. Too little, too late. Packets have been distributed. The audit uncovered more than expected, Tess continued. Then she paused. Are you sure about this? Once it is out there, there is no going back. They need to understand, I said quietly. Having a family name does not give you the right to abuse trust. I turned toward the glass. My reflection was clear and composed. No more cardigans or denim. Today I wore a dark, elegantly tailored suit. The kind Marjorie always imagined I'd wear to land a husband. Instead, I would wear it to dismantle everything they built on pretense. The ownership notice goes public in 15 minutes, Tess said. Once it is live, they will know. Then it is time, I replied, picking up my briefcase. The moment I stepped into the Briarlay Plaza boardroom, the conversation died. The directors were in place. My family huddled near the end of the table, tense, unprepared. Grant stood up. "Who are you supposed to be? This is not for guests." I calmly set my briefcase at the head of the table. "My name is Deborah Winslow," I said. "I am the founder and sole owner of Foundation Hill Group. This building, and several others your family mishandled, now belong to me." Marjorie's complexion drained of color. Vivian opened her mouth, but nothing came out. My father tightened his grip on his pen. "Deborah," he said, almost a whisper. I gave a small nod. "Good morning." Then I opened the briefcase and began sliding the audit reports down the table, one by one. "Shall we take a look at your financial records?" "This is insane," Grant sputtered. You're the outcast. The tenant. The one in thrift store outfits." Vivian blinked slowly. "But, you show apartments." "I work," I said plainly. "And I built something real. With principles, not appearances." The board remained frozen, watching in disbelief as the once proud Winslow family began to come apart, one document at a time. "These files," I said, opening the folders, "detail every diverted fund, every bloated invoice, and each falsified receipt linked to Briarlay Plaza's accounts." I passed out the final batch of reports. "Grant, perhaps you would like to explain the $3 million labeled as roof repairs, money that actually funded your Napa Valley estate." His face flushed deep red, fast and fierce. "And Vivian," I said, flipping the next page, "maybe you can clarify why your husband's plumbing invoices came in at 2 times the market rate. You would expose your own family like this?" Aunt Marjorie gasped. "No," I replied evenly. "You did that. I am just ensuring it is addressed properly." My father finally spoke, his voice low and shaking. "Deborah, please. We can explain." "There is no need," I said, lifting my hand to stop him. "I have watched this family drain our great-grandfather's legacy like it was a personal bank account. While you mocked my quiet life, I was building something better, founded on respect, not ego." "But why?" Vivian asked, dazed. "Why live like that? Why let us think?" "I never claimed to be struggling," I answered. "I lived within my means. I invested with care. You just assumed real wealth had to shout." "The Harper Street place," Grant said, stunned. "You actually live there?" "I own it," I corrected him. "Along with most of that block. And no, I am not tearing it down. Because some of us value people over pure profit." Just then, phones around the room started buzzing. One of the board members glanced up from his screen. "Foundation Hill Group just released a statement," he said. "The chief executive officer has been identified as Deborah Winslow. Member of the Winslow family. Owner of a $3 billion real estate portfolio." Another murmured, eyes still scanning. "Ranked among top ethical developers, historic preservation, tenant protections." "This will destroy us," Vivian whispered, pale. "No," I said firmly. "This may be the only thing that saves you." "From this day forward," I continued, "Briarlay Plaza will be run with full transparency. No secret accounts. No insider deals." "And if we do not comply?" Grant asked, trying to sound firm, though his voice cracked. I smiled. "Then these reports go directly to the authorities. I imagine the Internal Revenue Service would be very interested." The room fell silent. "What is it that you want?" my father asked finally. "I want you to remember what the Winslow name used to stand for, before all of this." I looked around the table, locking eyes with each of them. Our great-grandfather built communities. Not vanity projects. Not extraction schemes. I gathered the paperwork. "You have a choice," I said. "Help me restore that purpose. Or find new housing. I hear Hartford has a few decent rentals." I turned to leave. "Deborah, wait," my father called as I reached the door. "I misjudged you." "Yes," I said quietly. "You did." What followed felt like something pulled straight from a corporate exposé. The media seized the story of a quiet Bridgeport woman who had built a billion-dollar empire behind the scenes, and exposed her powerful family in a single boardroom showdown. Aunt Marjorie stepped down from every local organization she was part of, too embarrassed to face the fallout. Vivian's husband's company shut down within weeks of the audit. But not everything turned bitter. Grant, finally held accountable, enrolled in a public university's real estate program. Vivian started volunteering at a transitional housing shelter. She told me later that helping others gave her more meaning than all her gallery events ever had. As for my father, he came to me with questions. Not as someone trying to take control, but as a student. He wanted to understand what I had built. 5 months later, I sat in my apartment on Harper Street. I kept it, going over quarterly reports. Briarlay Plaza was thriving. Lease renewals were steady. Tenant satisfaction was rising. The small businesses downstairs were doing better than ever. A knock at the door pulled me from my work. I opened it to find my mother. She wore jeans and no makeup. For a moment, I did not recognize her. It was the most casual I had ever seen her. "I got your invitation," she said, holding up the card. "A courtyard holiday party," I replied. "It may not be your usual crowd." She stood quietly for a moment, taking in my small apartment. Her eyes moved across the room, pausing at the photo on the bookshelf, me at 22, holding my real estate license with a smile so wide it looked like belief. There was no judgment on her face this time. Just curiosity. Then, a quiet acknowledgement, maybe status was not everything. She did not need to ask why I chose this life. The answer was right there, in the space itself. Nothing extravagant, but every part of it had purpose. I had chosen this path to build something meaningful, not to decorate a title. She seemed to realize it then, the quiet structure behind what I had created. The reason I held more influence now than the entire family had managed to preserve. But power had never been the point. I wanted something lasting, something honest. Later that evening, I stood by the window and looked out over Bridgeport. My city. One I had helped shape without ever needing to claim it publicly. Off in the distance, Briarlay Plaza glowed softly, no longer a monument to excess, but a place being restored with care. Below me, Harper Street was alive with warmth. The preserved wood beams, brickwork, and small garden courtyards held stories older than my name. They were safe now. My phone lit up. Inquiries from investors, invitations to speak, acquisition proposals. Foundation Hill Group had become a name people wanted to work with. Still, I kept my schedule light, my mornings quiet. Success, to me, meant creating something steady, something that served others while staying rooted. 2 weeks later, during our winter gathering at Harper Street, I watched my family begin to experience the world from a different perspective. My mother was seated beside a tenant who had lived there for nearly 3 decades. They were talking, not out of obligation, but with real attention. Grant was up on a ladder helping hang lights, working alongside one of our oldest residents, a retired veteran with stories heavier than any of our family portfolios. Even Vivian, who once scoffed at my lifestyle, now stood at a folding table covered in frosting and sugar cookies, surrounded by children. They were starting to see what I had spent years quietly protecting, that real value is not found in what you acquire, but in what you preserve, elevate, and share. My father approached me near the cocoa table. He mentioned my great-grandfather, how he used to believe buildings were meant to protect people, not just serve profit. I knew that already. I had found his old ledgers months ago. His handwritten notes still echoed that belief. What my family forgot, I had remembered. What they let go of, I picked up. They had expected me to fail. Instead, I built something they could never fully understand until now. I watched as the community around us lit up, neighbors laughing under warm lights, children spinning with joy, the air full of something more real than applause, connection. I had no interest in revenge. That was never the story. What I wanted was to build something that could not be taken away, because it was founded on purpose, not performance. If you have ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated, then you might know how that feels. This was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about choosing to live right, and letting that choice speak for itself.